Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Learn English, where we don't just speak English. We think in it, we feel it, and we understand its power. Today's episode is going to take you into the darker side of language. How people twist words not just to talk, but to control. Yes, this is the manipulator's mind, how language takes over your brain. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like someone said all the right words, but something still felt wrong? Maybe it was a politician. Maybe a salesperson, maybe even someone close to you. Today, we're going to unpack this manipulation. Unpack here means to examine something in detail, like opening a suitcase to look at everything inside. We'll explore powerful concepts like euphemisms, doublespeak, tone and connotation, framing, and of course the psychological abuse called gaslighting, why it became the word of the year, and how you can recognize it when it's happening to you. And don't worry, I'll explain every advanced word, every idiom, every phrasal verb, naturally, smoothly, just the way you like it. So let's begin this journey. You see, words are not just carriers of meaning. They are architects of perception. When someone uses language to manipulate, they aren't outright lying. They're engaging in linguistic subterfuge, a fancy way of saying they're using language to conceal their true intent. Take this example. Instead of saying, "We're going to fire 500 employees," a company might announce they're streamlining human capital to enhance operational agility. What just happened there? That's called semantic obfuscation. Let me break it down. Semantic relates to meaning. Obfuscation means making something deliberately unclear or confusing. It's like wrapping poison in velvet. It sounds soft, but it stings just the same. Have you ever heard this phrase? "We had to let him go." Sounds soft, almost polite. But what it really means is, we fired him. He lost his job. This, my friend, is a euphemism. A euphemism is a mild or indirect word used instead of a more direct or harsh one, especially when the truth might be uncomfortable. For example, people say passed away instead of died. They say correctional facility instead of prison. They say enhanced interrogation instead of torture. See how the words are softened? That's no accident. Politicians, businesses, even the media use euphemisms to manipulate emotion, to make something terrible sound acceptable. This trick works because of something called cognitive dissonance. That's when your brain feels discomfort from holding two conflicting ideas at once. So instead of saying war, they say military operation. It sounds technical, less emotional, so your brain feels less stress. They're not just changing words, they're changing your feelings. Now, let's go deeper. Have you ever listened to a speech in which a person talked for 20 minutes, but said absolutely nothing? That's what we call doublespeak. Doublespeak is when someone intentionally uses vague, confusing, or contradictory language to mislead people. Let me give you a classic corporate example. We're optimizing our human resources portfolio. Sounds fancy, right? But what they're actually saying is, we're firing people. Another example, collateral damage, which is just a technical way of saying, innocent people were killed. Collateral damage refers to unintentional deaths, injuries, or damage to property that occur as a result of military actions or operations, particularly during a war or conflict, but primarily affecting civilians or non-military targets. Doublespeak is often full of jargon, specialized language that only insiders understand. Jargon is like a secret code. It can sound impressive, but it also hides meaning from the average person. And this isn't just theory. In George Orwell's novel 1984, the government used a language called newspeak, where they literally removed words from the dictionary to control how people think. Newspeak is a language with a limited vocabulary and simplified grammar. Its purpose is to restrict critical thinking and control the thoughts of its speakers. By reducing the available words and simplifying sentence structures, newspeak aims to make complex thought processes impossible. Why? Because if you limit language, you limit thought. That's the real danger. Now here's something subtle. Two words can mean the same thing, but feel completely different. Let me show you. He's slim. He's skinny. Same meaning, right? Both describe a thin person. But slim feels positive, maybe healthy, attractive. Skinny feels negative, maybe weak, unhealthy. This difference is called connotation. Connotation means the emotional or cultural meaning of a word, beyond just its dictionary definition. Another example, cheap versus affordable, stubborn versus determined. Technically, they're similar. but they carry very different emotional weight. Now, let's add tone. Tone is the attitude or emotion behind the way something is said. Example, "Oh, great." If said with joy, it means you're happy. But if said with sarcasm, like, "Oh, great," it means the opposite. Sarcasm is when you say something positive but means something negative, often used to mock or criticize. Manipulators weaponize tone. They can cloak insults in compliments or mask contempt in humor. When someone says, "I was just joking," after a cutting comment, that's often a way to dodge accountability. We call that backhanded compliments, statements that seem flattering but contain an insult. Tone and connotation are how manipulators hide their real intentions behind friendly words. They sound nice, but they're not being honest. A paper from Harvard Kennedy School analyzed political speeches and found that subtle changes in emotive vocabulary shifted public opinion by as much as 18%. So, language matters. Let's now talk about framing, a concept from psychology and advertising. Framing is when someone presents information in a way that influences your perception, without changing the actual facts. Here's a famous example. "This surgery has a 90% success rate." Sounds good, right? But what if I said, "This surgery has a 10% failure rate"? Same data, totally different feeling. That's the framing effect, one of the strongest cognitive biases in human psychology. A cognitive bias is a mental shortcut your brain takes, often leading you to wrong conclusions. Marketers use it. Politicians use it. Even friends in arguments use it. They're not lying. They're just telling the truth in a specific way to make you feel what they want. They use loaded language, terms designed to elicit a strong emotional reaction. Words like freedom, patriot, elite, and traitor carry ideological weight. They're not just descriptive, they're persuasive. This is also where anchoring bias comes in. Anchoring bias is a psychological principle where the first piece of information you hear affects how you interpret everything afterward. Let's say, "I tell you this course normally costs $1,000. Then I say, "But for you, just $199. Suddenly, $199 feels like a bargain. You've been anchored. Your perception of value was manipulated. And that brings us to our next most dangerous form of manipulation. Now, we arrive at the crown jewel of manipulation, gaslighting. The term comes from the 1944 movie Gaslight, where a husband manipulates his wife into doubting her own sanity. Gaslighting is not just lying. It's warping your sense of reality. Gaslighting means to manipulate someone into questioning their own memories, feelings, or sanity. Here's how it sounds. "You're overreacting. That's not what happened. You always make things up." At first, you argue, but over time, you start to wonder, maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I did imagine that. This kind of manipulation is deeply toxic, which means it's emotionally and mentally harmful. Psychologists link gaslighting to narcissistic behavior, when someone believes they're always right and superior to others, even if it hurts people. A 2019 study in the Journal of Interpersonal Violence showed that gaslighting can lead to anxiety, depression, and self-doubt in victims. And that's why gaslighting was named the Oxford Word of the Year in 2022. People finally had a word for what they were experiencing. Recognizing gaslighting is the first step toward breaking the spell. And the antidote? Self-trust, emotional clarity, language awareness. Let's bring in some colorful expressions, because English is full of idioms and phrasal verbs used in manipulation. I'll explain each one as we go. To bend the truth. This means to distort the facts slightly without fully lying. For example, he didn't lie, he just bent the truth a little. To lead someone on to make someone believe something false, especially in love or promises. She thought he loved her, but he was just leading her on. To talk someone into something to convince someone to do something, often using charm or pressure. He talked me into investing money I didn't want to spend. To cover up to hide the truth, especially about a mistake or crime. They tried to cover up the scandal. Smoke and mirrors. Something that hides the truth using distraction or confusion. The government's promises were all smoke and mirrors. Pull the wool over someone's eyes. To deceive someone by hiding the truth. Example, the company tried to pull the wool over investors' eyes by falsifying financial reports. To sugarcoat, to make something unpleasant seem more palatable. Don't sugarcoat the results, tell me the truth. Using these expressions will help you speak more like a native and think more like a detective. Have you ever felt like someone's words were technically correct, but something about the way they used them felt like a trap? If so, you were probably a target of what I call linguistic camouflage. Camouflage means hiding something by blending it with its surroundings. In war, soldiers wear green to hide in forests. In language, manipulators use vague, ambiguous, or poetic language to hide the truth in plain sight. Linguistic camouflage means using beautiful or complex words to mask one's true intentions. Example, we are enhancing cross-functional synergy for better outcomes. Sounds impressive, but what does it really mean? Nothing. It's an empty phrase, filled with buzzwords. Buzzwords are trendy words or phrases that sound important but often lack real meaning. This kind of language is used in politics, corporate culture, and even social movements to appear sophisticated while dodging accountability. To dodge something means to avoid it skillfully, usually in a sneaky or dishonest way. So when someone talks like this, pause. Ask, what are they really saying? Because complexity doesn't always mean intelligence. Sometimes it means deception. Let's go even deeper, into the science of language and the brain. Have you heard of NLP? Not the AI kind. I mean neuro-linguistic programming. NLP is a psychological approach that explores how language patterns influence human behavior. It's often used in sales, therapy, and, unfortunately, in manipulation. For example, in NLP, there's a technique called mirroring, where you subtly imitate someone's posture, speech, or tone to build rapport. To build rapport means to create a sense of trust or emotional connection. Sounds helpful, right? But in the wrong hands, NLP can be used to bypass critical thinking. How? Let's say someone says, imagine how amazing it will feel when you finally say yes. That sentence does a few things. It uses sensory language like feel amazing. It creates a future image in your mind. And it uses presupposition. It assumes you will say yes, subtly removing your ability to say no. Presupposition is when a statement assumes something as true without directly stating it. This is why trained manipulators speak not to your logic, but to your subconscious, the hidden part of your brain that responds emotionally. Here's a truth most people ignore. The labels we use shape how we see ourselves and others. If someone calls you lazy repeatedly, eventually your brain starts to internalize it. To internalize means to absorb an idea so deeply that it becomes part of your identity. This is called identity manipulation, a tactic used in relationships, media, and even school systems. Example, you're such a drama queen. That label dismisses emotional expression as exaggerated or fake. Another, real men don't cry, a phrase that uses language to police identity, which means controlling people by limiting their acceptable behavior. By assigning labels, manipulators control the narrative, the story people believe about themselves. Narrative here means the way a story is structured or framed to influence belief. So if you want to resist manipulation, learn to challenge the labels others put on you. Ask, is this who I am? Or just how they want me to act? This part will blow your mind. In medicine, there's something called the placebo effect. A placebo is a fake treatment, a sugar pill that has no real medical value. But here's the twist. If a person believes it's real, their body starts to heal. That's the power of belief. And it applies to language too. When someone says, you're going to crush it today, they might just be using positive reinforcement, a psychological strategy to boost your motivation. Positive reinforcement means encouraging a behavior by rewarding it, often with praise or support. But what happens when someone uses the reverse? You always mess things up. You're not smart enough for that. That becomes a verbal nocebo, words that damage instead of heal. Nocebo is the opposite of placebo. It's a harmless thing that causes harm because of negative expectations. So yes, words alone can actually influence your biology, your heart rate, your confidence, even your immune system. Speak wisely, and protect your mind from toxic talk. Now let's talk about a very sneaky communication style, passive aggressiveness. Passive aggressive behavior means expressing anger or disagreement in an indirect, subtle, or sarcastic way instead of being honest. You've probably heard this kind of language. Wow, you actually finished it on time. I'm impressed. Oh, you look so tired today. Everything okay? These are backhanded compliments. They seem kind on the surface, but carry a hidden insult. Backhanded compliment is a statement that seems flattering, but is actually critical. Why do people do this? Because it allows them to express hostility while maintaining plausible deniability. Plausible deniability means they can deny any bad intention, because their words could be interpreted differently. This is manipulation through ambiguity, and recognizing it is your first step toward setting boundaries. Let's now enter the world of metaphors. A metaphor is when you describe something as something else to help others understand it more vividly. Example, time is money. She's a rock. The world is a stage. Harmless? Maybe. But cognitive scientist George Lakoff says, metaphors are not just poetic, they shape the way we reason. If you describe crime as a beast, people tend to support aggressive punishment. If you call it a virus, they prefer treatment and prevention. Same problem, different metaphor. Totally different response. So, next time you hear a metaphor, pause. Ask, what worldview is this shaping? Because metaphors are not decorations, they are directions. Let's talk about the manipulation that doesn't use words at all. Silence. Sometimes, silence is peaceful, but other times it's a power play. Example, a partner gives you the silent treatment. That's when someone refuses to talk to you as a form of punishment. A boss doesn't reply to your email. A group ignores your idea in a meeting. This is withholding communication, a technique used to make you feel invisible, unworthy, or anxious. Psychologists call this stonewalling, when someone shuts down communication to avoid responsibility or control the conversation. To stonewall means to deliberately refuse to engage or respond. This form of manipulation is subtle, but it hurts. And over time, it can damage your confidence and emotional stability. Have you ever noticed how the order of words changes their emotional weight? Framing means presenting information in a certain way to shape how people interpret it. Reframing is changing that presentation to shift someone's perception. Example, he failed, but he tried his best. Now flip it. He tried his best, but he failed. Same facts, different frame. And the second version feels darker, doesn't it? Why? Because humans process language sequentially. What we hear first colors what we hear next. To color something, metaphorically, means to influence how it's perceived emotionally. This is why skilled speakers always start with their preferred emotional angle. They don't lie, they just rearrange the truth. It's not about the facts, it's about the frame. Language can also warp time. Chronological manipulation is when someone alters the sequence of events in their storytelling to protect themselves or gain sympathy. Let me show you. Consider two sentences. I hit him after he insulted me. He insulted me after I hit him. Tiny difference, huge impact. Both statements could be true, but whoever speaks first controls the narrative flow, the mental timeline you're building in your head. Narrative flow refers to the way a story is structured to influence understanding or emotion. In politics and relationships, people often manipulate this timeline. Mistakes were made before I arrived. This makes it seem like the problem existed before they had anything to do with it, even if they caused it. It's like rewriting history, just with sentence structure. Now let's move to a subtle but common tactic, hedging. Hedging means using vague or indirect words to avoid being fully responsible. People hedge with phrases like, I could be wrong, but it seems like, maybe we should consider. This sounds humble, but sometimes it's just an escape hatch. An escape hatch is an idiom meaning a way to avoid commitment or consequences. Example, there may have been a miscommunication on your part. Here, the speaker uses passive grammar and a conditional modal verb, may, to blur fault. Blur means to make something unclear or indistinct. In formal writing and media, hedging appears in phrases like, it is believed that, experts suggest that. Notice how no one is actually named? That's strategic. Why? Because when you don't name the actor, you don't have to prove the action. Let's talk about legalese, the overly formal and complicated language used in contracts and official documents. Legalese is often deliberately dense to obscure meaning. Let's try an example from a fake contract. The aforementioned party shall not be held liable for incidental, consequential, or intangible damages arising from the misinterpretation of implied terms. What? Here's what it actually means. We're not responsible if this screws up your life, even if it's our fault. Why use all that complicated vocabulary? Because complexity discourages scrutiny. To scrutinize means to examine carefully and critically. And many people, especially when signing agreements, assume legal language is too advanced to question. This is why fine print manipulation is so dangerous. It's not lying, but it's weaponized complexity. Next, let's explore emotional distancing. This is when someone uses clinical, detached, or neutral language to describe emotionally charged situations. Why? Because it reduces empathy and makes bad things sound normal. Example, the subject was neutralized. This phrase is common in military language, and it means a person was killed. Another example, there were civilian casualties. Instead of saying innocent people died, they sanitized the statement. To sanitize means to make something unpleasant seem cleaner or more acceptable. Emotional distancing language often uses the passive voice, which lets speakers avoid naming who is responsible. Mistakes were made. By whom? We don't know. And that's the point. It's not just manipulation, it's linguistic anesthetic. Anesthetic is something that numbs pain. So, linguistic anesthetic is language that numbs emotional response. Strategic interruption is cutting someone off at just the right moment to change direction, create doubt, or stop them from completing a persuasive thought. Imagine a debate. Person A. If we look at the data from person B, excuse me, are you even qualified to talk about this? Here, person B derails the conversation. To derail something means to throw it off track. It's not about truth, it's about momentum control. If you stop someone's sentence, you stop their power. In negotiations, arguments, even therapy sessions, interruption is a dominance move. Recognize it, stay composed, finish your thought. Now, let's talk about how language pretends to be scientific. You've heard this before. Studies show 9 out of 10 experts agree. There's a 43% increase in satisfaction. Now, those might be true, but sometimes they're used to create the illusion of objectivity. Objectivity means being unbiased and neutral. The illusion of it is when someone pretends to be neutral while pushing a specific agenda. Even grammar helps. Mistakes were made, passive, versus he made mistakes, active. The passive voice hides the doer of the action. This creates an emotional buffer. Buffer means a protective layer. In this case, between the audience and the speaker's guilt. The manipulator remains in the shadows while sounding smart, informed, and neutral. But remember, the one who controls the form of language controls the force of the message. Chomsky and Herman's manufacturing consent introduces the propaganda model. According to them, the media doesn't always lie. It filters, frames, and selectively presents reality. It's like a lens that doesn't distort the image. It merely decides what part of the picture you get to see. They proposed 5 filters through which information is processed before it reaches you. 1. Ownership. Most media houses are owned by massive conglomerates, entities with commercial interests. If a news channel is owned by a weapons manufacturer, do you think it'll criticize the arms industry? Unlikely. That's vested interest. When someone's involvement is motivated by personal gain, vested means secured or in possession. And when used in this context, it hints at bias that's been baked into the system. 2. Advertising. Here's a disturbing fact. Most news is not funded by viewers. It's funded by advertisers. That creates an inherent pressure to please those who pay the bills. It introduces a conflict of interest, a situation where someone's duty and their benefit collide. So if a soft drink company is a major advertiser, will media outlets dare to publish research showing sugar's health risks? Not likely. 3. Sourcing. Newsrooms depend heavily on official sources. Government briefings, press conferences, corporate spokespeople. This leads to a reliance on what's called institutional information pipelines, where facts are funneled in one direction, downward from authority. Challenging these sources risks access denial, where journalists are blacklisted or ignored. Flack refers to the retaliatory criticism media faces when it steps out of line. This could be legal threats, smear campaigns, or aggressive lobbying. It creates a chilling effect, making editors second-guess whether to publish controversial pieces. 5. Ideology. The final filter, initially named anti-communism, has evolved into any dominant ideology. Whether it's nationalism, capitalism, or political correctness, prevailing beliefs are reinforced while alternatives are vilified. These 5 filters form an insidious framework. Insidious meaning something harmful that works gradually and subtly. You don't feel manipulated, but you are. As Noam Chomsky says, the smart way to keep people passive is to strictly limit the spectrum of acceptable opinion, but allow very lively debate within that spectrum. Let me ask you a question. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit. Sound familiar? That was the defense's slogan during the O.J. Simpson trial. The phrase was powerful not because it was logical, but because it rhymed. This is the rhyme as reason effect, a psychological bias where people believe rhyming statements are more truthful than non-rhyming ones, even when content is identical. Why? Because rhyme creates cognitive fluency. It feels smooth, familiar, and therefore trustworthy. Our brain mistakes the ease of processing for credibility. Cognitive refers to anything related to thinking or mental processes, and fluency here means mental smoothness, not language skill. Marketers use this all the time. A moment on the lips, a lifetime on the hips. Click it or ticket. No pain, no gain. They're catchy, they're convincing, and they bypass your logic. You walk into a store, soft music playing, warm lighting, faint aroma of cinnamon in the air, and suddenly you feel calm, happy even. That's not a coincidence. It's emotional branding at work. Emotional branding is the art of connecting a product to your identity and feelings, not just your needs. Instead of saying, "This phone has a great camera," the message becomes, "This phone makes you cool, desirable, confident." This taps into implicit processing, which is our ability to absorb messages without being consciously aware. The ad doesn't say, "This car makes you powerful," but the slow-motion shots, deep male voice, and roaring engine plant that seed anyway. Advertisers also use semantic associations, linking certain words or ideas with emotions. For instance, luxury evokes exclusivity, organic evokes purity, freedom evokes patriotism and independence. This is how brands construct identities, not just products. Have you ever wondered why food ads show burgers sizzling, or perfume commercials are filled with slow-motion shots of silk? They're tapping into the picture superiority effect, the phenomenon where people remember visuals better than text. But it doesn't stop there. Smells, sounds, and textures are used to trigger emotional responses. For example, a spa might play ocean sounds to elicit calmness. Supermarkets bake bread in-store to trigger nostalgia, a bittersweet longing for the past. A soft fabric texture in product packaging may suggest comfort or warmth. This is known as multisensory marketing, the use of multiple senses to create a rich, memorable experience. When combined with language, like crisp, velvety, or zesty, the emotional impact multiplies, and most of this happens subconsciously, meaning outside our awareness. In the digital world, language doesn't just spread through people, it's amplified by algorithms. These are mathematical models that predict what you're likely to click on next. René DeResta, a researcher on network manipulation, explains how certain types of content, especially emotional, polarizing language, are more likely to go viral. That's because algorithms reward engagement, not accuracy. And this creates an echo chamber, a closed system where you're only exposed to views you already agree with. You're not learning, you're looping. Meanwhile, disinformation, deliberately false information, spreads rapidly because it's sensational, emotionally charged, and easy to digest. What makes this so dangerous is that it feels organic, like your beliefs are being reinforced naturally. But in reality, your attention is being engineered. So, how do we protect ourselves from all this? Here's your checklist. 1. Ask questions. Don't accept vague words. Ask, what does that really mean? 2. Notice tone and connotation. How is it being said? What feeling is the word carrying? 3. Watch for euphemisms and doublespeak. Are they softening something serious? 4. Stay grounded in facts. Don't let emotion override truth. Check the numbers. Read the fine print. 5. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, pause. Dig deeper. We live in a world where words don't just describe, they direct. Where stories don't just inform, they indoctrinate. And where the most dangerous manipulation is the one that goes unnoticed. But awareness is power. Once you understand how language is being used against you, you can begin to use it for yourself, to think critically, to ask deeper questions, and to choose your own narrative. In the end, the most powerful language is not the one you hear, it's the one you challenge. Stay curious, stay conscious, and above all, stay unmanipulated.